La única cosa es que vamos a revisar acá. 7 uniques nuevos, vamos a tener que verlo en las patch notes. Cambio importante al Atlas, recontra, pero mira, sí. Ultra marcado. Depth check, ahorita lo vamos a ver. Sun is back, no. No Mayflock, no sabemos todavía. Maven New Invitation, no sabemos, ¿verdad? Todavía no sabemos. Divination Shards, no, pero tenemos Fracture Shards. ¿Cómo se llama llegar a las alas? Ni idea. O sea, sin declaración drops. Ahí lo vas a ver. Pero igual no es una hora. Creo que es una hora lo que tienes que ver. No me acuerdo. Comenzó de una.
Good morning, Exiles.
Good
And
morning.
welcome back for another Q&A session with none other than Chris Wilson. Good morning, Chris. Thank you for joining us once again.
Oh, thanks for being here as well.
I'm very keen to jump into chatting about Forbidden Sanctum straight away. But as always, you folks can put your questions in the chat, and our helpful team of moderators will pull some out for us to answer. So, Path of Exile gets to be so many things. It has gotten to be so many things over the years. Do you ever really feel like you just don't need to make another game in any other genre because you can just make a league that is that genre? Like make a farming league or a city building league or a roguelike
hay tantas
league?
cosas que sientes que no tienes que hacer otro juego, solo que puedes crear algo que quieras agregar.
We always try to make sure that when we're designing our leagues, they're games that fit within the idea of being an action RPG. Like they have to involve you killing monsters and finding items in order to fit within Path of Exile.
Yeah, so even when you're farming, you're killing monsters, or even when you're fishing, you're killing monsters.
Yeah, there's
the one where we pull
bit
monsters
of an agenda
out of
there,
Ziggy. I was planning on pushing the fishing angle.
So that's when you get on the boat and have your fishing league, right?
And you like pull monsters out of the water, right?
Está diciendo, está tratando de baitearlo de que diga algo acerca de fishing.
Interesting. That one's under NDA. Sorry.
Aún están a tiempo del.
I'm in trouble.
Del drop, yes.
How do you gain access to the new Forbidden Sanctum?
¿Cómo tienes acceso al nuevo
every area you're
Sanctum?
playing in has a portal that gives you access to it. It basically takes you to the next room that you're playing in the Sanctum in your current run.
Ah, okay. So to clarify then, the Sanctum's divided into rooms, each with their own encounter,
área te
and then
lleva
floors
al
with a boss
siguiente
at the end
cuarto
of each.
del
And then
Forbidden
there's the
Sanctum.
whole Sanctum itself, which is multiple floors?
That's right. So the Sanctum itself has 4 floors, each one guarded by a boss at the end with the ultimate boss fight at the end of the 4th floor. And each of the floors has 8 rooms. And so a maximum length Sanctum run would be 32 consecutive rooms, which you'd play out over potentially 32 maps. But it's worth emphasizing that, as with most roguelikes, you don't just install it and then happily play through to the end in one go. It's something that you get further and further with each run. As you get better meta progression, as you learn more about
un
it.
Sanctum tiene 4 pisos, cada piso tiene su boss, un total de 32 cuartos.
Kind of as you're
Pero
leveling
lo vas haciendo un cuarto cada vez que entras
Is
a un
there
mapa.
any potential, do you think, that someone who's like quite good at the game maybe gets through on their first try, or is this
Alguien que sea muy bueno en el juego puede hacerlo en el primer intento? ¿O?
We never underestimate the players, right? Like we will try as hard as we can to achieve something, and then players will just blow right past that because there are millions of them and they're pretty damn good at the game. So I don't want to make any promises there, but it certainly is the case that in order to get really deep into the Sanctum, you have to know a lot about it. You have to have some experience with it. You have to ideally have a good character with a capable build. You'd ideally have a good setup of your relics, which are the meta progression. To get to the deeper floors, it certainly requires that you've assembled relics that fit with your strategy. And it also helps to be having a good run. I can't emphasize that enough. It's very roguelike, where you're picking up these random boons, these random afflictions.
Dice que
If you get the
es
bad
bastante
afflictions on
roguelike.
you early on, that run
Si
is
tú
not
eres
gonna
muy
last
bueno,
long.
en
If you get a
teoría
really good
podrías
set of boons,
hacerlo.
you could have a really deep
En teoría
run
podrías
much further
hacerlo,
than you otherwise would
pero
at your current
nosotros lo
level.
diseñamos totalmente como para que no puedas. Deberías tener un muy buen run para poder llegar hasta el final y aprender bastante acerca del Sanctum.
Was around 11 maps to build a full temple and then run that. That was that's a pretty sizable thing. So this is a lot bigger than that then.
That's correct, but a lot of the rewards you're getting along the way, and so it's entirely fine to play the Sanctum a few floors in and then fail and play again, and it's still a rewarding experience, assuming you don't gamble on pushing the reward right to the end of the entire Sanctum run, but it's unlikely you're going to choose to do that until you are really confident in your ability to do this run particularly well.
Ok, dice que claro, o sea, el templo son 11 cuartos que tienes que hacer antes de recibir tus recompensas y tal, ¿no? Antes de hacer el templo en sí. Y esto es mucho más grande. El tema es que en cada cuarto tú puedes recibir recompensas, al menos que tú empujes a que todas las recompensas las recibas al
final. It was kind
final.
of funny because in the live stream I said this is a massive reward, and we're showing like a few chaos orbs as the reward. So of course, chat memed that as much as they could. The thing is, okay, so let's do some math here, right? It's 32 32 rooms in a Sanctum run, and deferrals make up something like 40%. Deferral is what I'm internally calling the offer reward here. It makes up around 40% of the rooms. And so if you're offered an average of a whole bunch of Chaos Orbs, I think the example there had like 18, but obviously the currency numbers will vary a lot, then and you were to defer those entirely to the end of the Sanctum run, you would be getting hundreds of currency, and it can have divines, mirrors, and various other stuff in there.
Okay, está diciendo
so it's entirely possible that were you to defer everything to the end in a big gamble,
de que tú puedes diferir la currency. Alguien dice como que 18 caos, gran cosa, no, porque el 40% del santuario son cosas de recompensa. Por lo tanto, tú puedes diferir eso hasta el final y tener cientos de caos o divines o mirrors incluso.
It's still worthwhile. If you play the Sanctum and just took the reward immediately, it's a decent amount of currency that makes it worthwhile on top of the other rewards you're getting. But there's always the temptation of the end of the floor. The floor one is the one that's juiced a little bit. Of course, in later floors, the end of the Sanctum doesn't look very far away. And if you know you're having a good run, you've got confidence, then why not take the extra reward by doing the big gamble?
Estaba diciendo como que, ¿sabes?
This deferral mechanic is super interesting.
Y está bastante bufeado el tema de las recompensas al final del piso. Porque sabes, es el piso, puedes que llegue hasta ahí. Y cuando ya estás cerca del final del run, el tercer piso o ya en el cuarto piso, dices, el final del santuario no es tan lejos, también lo puedo hacer.
Sorry?
I was just going to say, this is because roguelikes have good runs and bad runs. If you're having a bad run, take the rewards now and get as far as you can. If you're having a great run, that gives you the ability to make an ultimatum-like gamble.
Yeah, right. You can make those strategic decisions kind of based on, like, this has been a
ultimatum gamble.
No way am I getting through this. I'm going to check out now. Got it. Makes sense. Have you thought about, like, the player mindset of just like, I always going to take the big one? Because I look at it and I'm like, I'm always going to take the one. And the biggest one, I'm never going to get it because I'm always going to die.
Ok, está diciendo de que ten en cuenta de que como los roguelikes, a veces tienes buenos runs y a veces tienes malos runs. Si tienes un mal run, deberías tomar la recompensa corta y llevártela y ya está. Pero si tienes un buen run, debes arriesgarte un poquito más, puede ser una buena idea.
Concept of the time value of money. $1 now is worth more than $1 later because you can put it to use right now. And when these full Sanctum runs taking 30 maps, maybe getting a pile of Chaoses, potentially some higher currency like Exalts and Divines, a few maps from now is actually better for your character development than getting a very large pile in 20 maps. Maybe, especially when there's a conditional element to that, it may be that getting something a few maps from now that you can then trade to get more progression is actually better for you. So there are a lot of hard decisions which we put on the table here for the players.
Claro, teniendo en cuenta que son 32 mapas en total y tal, tú puedes decir que un caos ahora puede valer más que un caos en 30 mapas.
Let's talk the resolve mechanic. So to clarify, resolve is an independent health bar for the Forbidden Sanctum specifically.
Resolve es una barra de vida independiente.
Out of the Sanctum, dead or not, right?
That's correct. Now, I noticed the reaction when we're announcing the resolve system there, as a lot of players said, why? As though this is a negative thing. But I want to have a chance to explain it. So we tried very hard initially to work out a system here that works with your player life. Then there's no additional bars. The problem is, though, Path of Exile's player life fluctuates up and down rapidly. You're constantly healing yourself, you've got recovery, there's no persistence to this. Your player life is like how out of breath you are, if you see what I mean. It's a very brief, it's almost like your heartbeat to some extent. And so if we were to say, look, if you lose some life in this room, then when you come back into the next room, that life is going to be missing. So you've got a kind of a progression through the Sanctum. Then they just press 1 and heal themselves fully and carry on playing. And so our experiments where
está diciendo como que si usáramos vida,
do not function as a roguelike. There has to be a thing where you get worn down. Having said that,
muy baja vida antes del 7/4, bueno, me curo, estoy full HP y ya está.
Is work out how you are recovering your resolve, and there are lots of different ways. It's along the lines, I mean, it's as simple
Entonces, de esa forma tú puedes usar tu regeneración de vida, puede ser útil, pero también tienes que usar esta otra mecánica que te permite tener situaciones interesantes.
And every time you have to choose something focusing on resolve recovery, you're implicitly losing.
Antes de jugar diría que estoy de acuerdo con esto.
Rewards or a different axis of power.
Porque si no, o sea, Kevin quiere tener 8000 de vida.
Forces you to focus on staying alive and not getting rewards. But conversely, this means if you're having a good run where you are not struggling at all, you can just kind of ignore your resolve and focus on becoming super powerful. And this works really well as a roguelike. And I would really encourage people to try it out before judging it based on the fact that it's an additional life bar. We don't add those kind of things, for no reason. And
aparentemente mucha gente estaba jugando eso en el trailer y él dice que, ¿sabes? Pruébenlo antes de eso porque nos esforzamos porque no lo hubiésemos puesto sin ninguna razón. Que ahora que lo está diciendo tiene total sentido. Yo estoy de acuerdo. ¿Qué piensan, chat? ¿Qué piensan, chat? Yo digo que está bueno. Yo digo que es una buena idea.
Yeah,
bog down the reveal for like 10 minutes. So that's super interesting. You actually touched on a topic I wanted to ask. So Resolve seems to reward high mobility play styles that can completely avoid attacks. So since mitigation doesn't affect Resolve damage, how does it feel playing like a low mobility tanky melee character in the Sanctum? Won't you kind of just be failing runs due to chip damage that otherwise is not a threat to you?
We thought of that. So we've made it so that the resolve damage is lower if you're close to a target. Essentially, if you're melee and you're right in their face, then you take less resolve damage than if you're further away. And so attacks are also very telegraphed. And that means that even if you're a tanky melee character, you have an opportunity to get out of the way.
Okay.
You probably should consider at least a Quicksilver Flask if you're going into the Sanctum so that you have some ability to respond to stuff. But that's normal path of Exile play. Even in Ruthless, where there's significantly less mobility skills,
te va a hacer
Quicksilver
menos
Flask
daño.
still
Pero
exists.
aparte, tus ataques son telegrafiados, por lo tanto tú puedes simplemente moverte ligeramente y eso te va a evitar recibir el daño. En otras palabras, Cyclone Baby, let's go.
And you keep them between runs. So if
Nos movemos, hacemos daño,
you
estamos
feel that you
cerca.
want more resolve
Listo.
recovery, get relics that do that. And if you're a character that's given up mobility, has some ability at the expense of maybe less damage or less tankiness or something, then there are other things they can specialize their relics into if they have enough resolve.
That taking less damage at close range thing is super interesting. Is that like kind of a fast shot mechanic applied to projectile attacks or something?
It's like that for all of the resolve stuff, and this is something that we've realized is necessary because the melee and tanky characters get up close, and so it's better for that to be balanced around it.
All right, cool. And just to clarify for people, if you are playing hardcore, this means you can fail the Sanctum without dying. So I was like, I thought
that's
great.
Hardcore.
Eso está bueno también, de que si juegas hardcore y fallas el santuario,
many times on the path
es altamente improbable que mueras también.
And so
solamente
if that
fallaste y
meant
ya
the
está.
hardcore character was dead and had to start again, it just wouldn't be a hardcore compatible league. And so
Listo, sale Cock.
a side effect of Resolve is that hardcore characters can actually engage with it without putting themselves in mortal danger. It also means, of course, with the way that experience penalties work, high-level characters can play without putting their current experience so much on the line. I mean, it's still very... I've died in the Sanctum numerous occasions with legitimate player life deaths because I was careless, but it's
estoy feliz por
certainly
esto, porque
easier
muchas
from a player
ligas
life
en las que
point
tú
of
ves a los
view
streamers en
than, say,
hardcore que
high-level mapping.
las saltan por completo
Well,
porque
that kind of
fuck it,
speaks
no
to
quiero
the
arriesgar mi
concept of
personaje.
Resolve as a whole. It's Resolve is about how well you've done over the course of the entire dungeon, whereas your health is how well you've done in this specific engagement, which is an interesting kind of like two-faceted approach that we don't normally have in Path of Exile. Like if you do bad at the start of a map, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the rest of the map, right?
Yeah, and it's also meant that if we want something to be dangerous, we up the resolve a bit. We don't up its damage, threatening the actual characters.
Interesting. Cool. All right. So to clarify on the sanctified relics, these are the ones where the effects work on your character outside.
Aparte de si
of the
queremos que algo
sanctum.
sea peligroso, puede ser el daño al no resolve y no vamos a matar a tu personaje.
Power progression for characters. They're hard to get. They're very end game. We're talking late maps here, and they're obviously due to the fact that they can't be crafted and can't be traded means that you are very limited in how many of these you get access to. But they are very powerful, and because of the fact that they can't be crafted or traded, we've made sure to juice the mods on them and make sure it's not watered down. These are relics which will significantly affect the character power of your build. Now, they are shared among all the characters on your account, meaning you can equip from the same pool. So it does mean that if you find one for one character and you want to use it on a different build, it's entirely possible to.
Okay.
Cool.
Dice que
how does the Sanctum work in a
el
party,
tema de
then?
las reliquias son bastante poderosas porque no
Got a
se
bunch of
pueden
rules here.
tradear.
Short answer is, as with all recent leagues, we want party play to work, but we also want it so that people don't feel encouraged to cheese things through party play. And so the philosophy basically is, like, one of the problems with Arch Nemesis with the whole culling situation is that players realize when they find a certain monster that, I now have to engage with other humans in order to get maximum result here. And we want Sanctum to work in a party without creating the feeling that you have to engage with humans in order to get the best out of your Sanctum. It shouldn't feel like you only want to go in there when you have a whole bunch of friends who are online at the same time. So we've come up with rules that enable you to play as a party, and certainly there are some benefits for doing so, but there is also some liability to it. And so the way it works is the Sanctum is always that of the map owner. The person who created the map is the one whose Sanctum you're playing. So if Ziggy and I are playing and we're doing Ziggy's Sanctum, he's the one getting the progress for that. I'm there to help, and afterwards it would be nice if he reciprocated and we did my Sanctum as well, but it's primarily your one that's progressing. And so this means that you are the one who makes the choices about stuff. This is the one, it's your relics matter there. We're using your gold, your boons, your afflictions, and your resolve bar. That's the important thing to note. If you invite other party members into your sanctum with you, they don't just get a free ability to have their own resolve bar, which doesn't matter, or they can run around and distract the monsters. You are, as a party, sharing the resolve bar with the map owner. And this means that extra party members can't just go and suicide themselves on stuff to distract the monsters. They actually have to be playing properly.
Dice, si juegas en parte del Sanctum,
Party member deaths do not
todos
end the
comparten la
current
misma
run,
barra
so if
de
they happen to
resolve.
die,
Por lo tanto,
legitimately, that doesn't screw up what you're doing. There's a bunch of other small rules
si ellos
there,
sufren,
like,
tú sufres y es
you
tu
know,
run
party
el que
members can view
importa.
the merchant and view the map, but only the
De
map owner
nada
actually
por
makes
las
the choices
alitas.
and purchases stuff. In practice, what this means is it's fun to bring people in and play together. It does give you a small advantage from a combat point of view if you have multiple players, but you do all have to be playing cohesively, so only bring in party members you trust. You can also drop party members in and out, so by that I mean, like, you know, I can play this room with Ziggy and the next one with someone else, and because it's sharing my resources, that's compatible without having to have like a party resolve bar that's, you know, reserved for a specific group of people and so on.
All right. So if I bring a viewer in and they want to sabotage me, they can run in front of all the monsters.
Yep.
Great.
That would be hilarious. You guys should do that.
Please.
Dice que también alguien puede entrar al party a trolear.
We got a couple of chat questions on the mechanics here
Porque
specifically.
ellos pueden agarrar y recibir el
daño
daño y tú pierdas tu
When
run.
you die in the sanctum via resolve death,
yes,
and your character flops on the ground like a fish, are you fully protected from taking any damage from any source, dots, anything like that? You guys have checked, right?
Yes. I checked this yesterday. The list of things.
Cuando tú te quedas sin resolve,
like,
tu personaje muere, se queda en el piso porque no tiene resolve, no puede ser
Minions
dañado.
take no actions. You have grace period. Dealt no damage. Minions have no damage. Minions cannot be damaged. There's a whole bunch of stuff.
Good. Okay, cool.
Okay, dice, estás protegido cuando pasa eso.
100% sure. We didn't want any people like, I fell over in the sanctum and then I died when I couldn't control my character. So, good.
Okay.
Excellent. Losing a resolve death, TK Hectic asks, is your XP lost or is your XP protected?
My belief is, correct me if I'm,
Dev check.
So that was the dev check. You don't lose experience if you fail out through the resolve, and that's because it isn't actually a death. It doesn't increase the deaths count. You don't lose experience, you don't lose hardcore
así que no pierdes
characters.
experiencia.
It's entirely basically fainting and being ejected.
Gotcha. Malik asks, do we need to interact with the league mechanic every zone, or can we somehow build them up or save them to run them all at once?
Esa es buena.
You do interact with it in every zone, and it's not a particularly long encounter. These aren't very large rooms, but yes, you should interact with every zone.
Yeah, sometimes you literally you would probably just portal in and click a fountain and leave, right? And then go back to your map?
The structure is that every room, so the basic way it works is you take the portal and you appear in a small antechamber, which enables you to make a choice. You click on the map, have a look at what the options are of where you want to go next. You can look a few ahead and you lock in a choice. And then a door, one of the 3 doors, or up to 3 doors in that room slides open. So you go through. Now you're in the actual main sanctum room. So you do whatever the objective is in there, which may be just getting to the exit or killing the guards or whatever. And this is not designed to take long. It's meant to not interrupt your mapping from a pace point of view.
Lo
and
va a
then you end
interrumpir.
up in the reward room. Every room has a reward, and these vary from all the things we've talked about, you know, fountains, affliction fountains, merchant, treasure room, and so on, or the offer one, which is the item deferral, and a whole bunch of other, I should add, there are a lot of other reward rooms we haven't shown in the live stream. Like the goal here is players explore and find stuff, so we only showed a subset in the announcement.
Básicamente, en cada mapa que entras tienes que interactuar con el santuario.
It's a relatively quick process and does improve your sanctum progress or give you some actual currency with each
es relativamente rápido y bla 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 lo que tú quieras, pero no me agrada eso porque no puedo guardarlo.
For this one, we were specifically like, let's try and avoid spoilers as much as possible for like the things you can discover in the Forbidden Sanctum. So there's a bit of a discovery process there.
There's a lot of discovery and there's quite a lot of story as well. Like
hay muchas cosas interesantes para descubrir. Dice que hay mucha historia, mucho lore.
Bad person in there and what's going on with that, but we'd much prefer people actually enjoy that rather than us dumping it all on them here.
And bosses too. I'm very excited.
Yeah, lots of boss fights.
Varios bosses.
I was thinking there might just be like 2 or something. Very good. Official Arrow asks, do totems, when they take damage, lose your resolve? And I'll tack onto that minions as well.
No, they do not.
Great.
Los minions de totem no reciben daño
damage affect resolve.
I don't think it does. There's a lot of shrugging. Nah. It's only damage that's tagged with affecting your resolve, like ones from the monsters. There are some let's say, environmental hazards in the Sanctum. You can see it briefly in some of the footage of some, like, big molten orbs flying around and so on, and that kind of thing. An object in the middle of the room that's spewing out laser beams that rotates, for example, that stuff will hurt your resolve. But it's really telegraphed. Like, it's very easy for people to deal with.
Well, there you go. That answers Monkey Dota's question as well. So we'll move on to the next topic, which is endgame changes. So the need to swap between bossing and mapping in the Atlas trees is definitely something that feels awkward, so I'm pretty excited to learn a bit more about that change. Many of the nodes have been rolled into the game as default now for bossing, but are there any passives that remain on the Atlas tree for bossing reward stuff? I'm guessing there are still nodes, for example, to enable the Uber versions of the various bosses, at least?
Yes, there are Uber nodes still, so if you want to play the Uber fights, you can allocate the passive, but thankfully that's a very small investment that you wouldn't do particularly often, and the main problem, which is where you feel like you have to fully spec into bosses and then fully unspec back into mapping, which is a large investment, is not there anymore. And it's worth noting the kind of people that are doing Uber pinnacle farming can afford the regrets to flick a passive on and off from time to time. But basically, the plan is that you can play bosses at any time without feeling like you have to respec your tree or you're missing out on something.
Okay.
I mean, it's also important to note that the Ubers are not the default bosses now, thankfully. Very good.
Dice, claro, que
some of the allocatable boss nodes made things more challenging in addition to
agarrar
rewarding.
ahorita todos los pasivos si quieres hacer bosses.
Inevitable Ambush, which solamente tienes que agarrar algunos. The Guardian fights.
Y no los tienes que estar quitando poniendo. Lo puedes hacer sin tener que hacer los Ubers.
Or are they just gone?
The ones that add extra challenge and rewards are gone for now, but this isn't a we don't like them, they're gone forever. It's a case that we want to bring them back in some form. And we have some plans for this. They probably won't be an at 320 release, but we do have some cool ways where basically the ability to opt in to the challenge and reward is not going to come from the tree because that creates the problems we've discussed, but it will come from somewhere. And so players will be able to get their challenge and reward back for those. But in the meantime, obviously, there's still a lot of ways you can ramp up the juice and challenge from these encounters.
Wait,
Jack was wondering
if
Atlas tree
los altares?
will be viewable today alongside patch notes, or is that a little bit later maybe?
I don't think it's today, but our expectation is to release it before release so that you do get a chance to play.
El Atlas tree no va a salir hoy, pero va a salir antes del inicio de la liga.
Of boss nodes being moved from the Atlas passive tree to the bosses directly. To avoid what happened last league with loot, are there any number changes happening with the modifiers?
I'm unaware of any. I mean, we've tried very hard to communicate everything as clearly as we can in the patch notes. I mean, I can't promise we haven't missed anything, but we have scoured stuff in order to try to make sure it's complete, and also written the live stream and our information up based on this kind of stuff. So we are trying very hard to disclose any small changes like that which would have an impact. I'm not aware of any stuff we haven't spoken about there.
All right, let's talk a bit about rare monsters. I think a lot of players are very happy to read the manifesto about the replacement of the arch-nemesis system for rare monsters with a new, more, I guess, nemesis-like system. Do you think that this new system will still achieve the goals that you set out to achieve with Arch-Nemesis, though?
So the goal of Arch-Nemesis initially was modernization of the effects and the balance. We felt that the old monster mods were just really old. We just basically needed to give them a fresh coat of paint. Now our fresh coat of paint included some stuff that players didn't like, and so we're trying very hard to make sure the new system does achieve the core goals of Arch-Nemesis without having the things that people didn't like. And so to that effect, it now does use modern effects. There's a lot of cool stuff that we weren't doing with the system that was 2 systems ago, and the balance is appropriate for current Path of Exile. So it's definitely ticks those boxes, but at the same time, it's trying to be much more understandable and simple and a bit less in your face than Arch-Nemesis was.
Entiendo que los nuevos Arch-Nemesis o los nuevos que es más como Nemesis cumple la mayoría de las cosas que ellos quieren que cumplan.
My impression so far is that the monsters are on average a bit easier, but the key thing is this: a previous Arch-Nemesis mod had a grab bag of stuff that it did. It generally made the monster do more damage in a generic sense. It also had an interesting thing that happened gameplay-wise, and it added a bunch of defensive properties, and often on multiple axes. And so it cohesively had a kind of this is a fire, it's going to screw you up with fire in 4 different ways kind of theme. And so therefore it applied to pretty much any character, right? It would have some way of interacting with them. The new mods are very simple. The new mods say, cool, you're not going to be able to do much fire damage to me, or I'm going to do a lot of fire damage to you, or I have a magma barrier. They just do one thing. And therefore, they're very, let's just say, Boolean against certain players. I'll give an example. Let's say you run into a rare monster with 2 mods, and those 2 mods are that it will blind you and that it's resistant to fire damage. So if you're playing a cold caster, neither of those mods affects you whatsoever. They're literally nothing. And so you can kill a monster easily and it doesn't do anything extra to you.
Okay.
Great. And on average, you're often
Por
encountering
ejemplo,
this.
un
But if
monstruo
you're
con
playing a
dos
fire
mods
melee character, it blinds you, which is going to affect your
que te
accuracy,
aplique
and the fire
te
damage is
aplica
going to be
blind
mitigated against it. This will
y
be a harder
te,
fight. It will wake you
y
up
te
a bit
reduzca el
when you
daño de
encounter
fuego,
it.
pero
And
tú,
so
tú
you're going
casteas
to
con hielo,
find this
no te hace nada.
situation where a lot more monsters are just speed bumps along the way and aren't causing a problem, and sometimes there'll be one which causes you issues because of your build. And so it's quite a different experience for different players, but overall, the monsters are at a glance much simpler in terms of what they do, and you're not encountering the onerous, long, frustrating fights every single area like you were
El
before.
tema de esto
like
es que
you
está más
feel
claro lo
good
que
when you're
hace. O
playing
sea,
a build
aunque sea
and
un
you
monstruo
run
que
into
sea
a
como que
challenge, you're
tiene
like,
las cosas que te
my
joden a
build
tu
doesn't
build,
care about this at
de todas
all.
maneras
You feel clever,
sabes
you know?
lo que hace. A diferencia de
Even
antes
though
que
it's
tenías
just
un
got a
monstruo que
luck of the
tenía
draw on that
más
one,
daño,
but
más
yeah, that
velocidad,
feels good.
más defensas,
So on the
más
modifiers, only
ataque,
doing what they
era
say,
mucho más rápido. Tenía
fantastic.
como que mejoras como en
However, there
10
still
axes
kind of remains a
distintos
problem
y
where
es
this
como que eso
information
a
is in a
cualquier
small
build le iba a
text list
joder.
at the top of the screen. Have you guys explored the idea of color coding the new modifiers in some way to help players identify them, or maybe using other systems like, I don't know, little symbols or maybe like color-coded glows on monsters to denote certain effects and so on?
They do have visual effects on them in many cases, so you often can see what a monster does based on what it looks like. But otherwise, what we focused on here is to succinctly and completely describe what the monster does in text. And this is a list that has more words than Arch Nemesis, because Arch Nemesis would have something like Flamewalker. And then what does that mean? Who knows? You'd learn, of course, but there were 70 plus of them.
Oh, yeah.
And so now it specifically says what it does. This may mean more reading. It may not be a good endpoint here, right? It might be that we need to make the things slightly more concise, but I'm really worried about us getting back into keywording, because part of the problem with keywording was then a player can't look at the keyword and actually understand what it does. So I don't know. Longer term, there are probably solutions here. Maybe the right answer is to put some color coding back. Currently, it's not color coded. That was something which went with the keywords in Arch Nemesis. I mean, it could be restored, but we'd like people to play and give us some feedback. If you guys can suggest how the mods can be made further clear, you know, so that you can easily identify them while you're playing,
diciendo que le demos
that's really
feedback
useful.
acerca de cómo prefiere que sean los mods.
We're open to feedback here. We want to make sure the
Ni siquiera, por
mod
ejemplo,
system achieves our goals and is still easy
ellos no
to
saben si
read.
ponerle color a los mods
I
es
think the color
correcto o
coding
no.
would be a good thing. It could be something that could be done gradually over time as
Yo
well.
creo que nada más viéndolo diría, sí, hay que ponerle color a eso. Porque es mucho más fácil de entender.
One thing we have done,
Mucho más fácil de entender.
isn't something we spoke about
Eso es
on
lo
the
que
live
tenía
stream, is that the
Nemesis
text
y que
under
era
the
bueno.
monsters that says like resist fire, resist cold, or vulnerable to fire, vulnerable to cold, the one that kicks in when they have approximately 15% resistance, was feeling a bit spammy alongside all these mods. Like when we're asking you to read 2 or 3 short lines of mod text, having like resist fire, resist cold underneath it as well was quite a lot. And so we've moved those to little symbols over on the right of the life bar. And so if you're the kind of character who cares about which monsters are fire resistant, you're just glancing at symbols now rather than trying to read text. And that's helped declutter it quite a bit.
So that's great. That sounds awesome. I look forward to seeing that. Yeah, it's kind of like what I was talking about. Yeah, little symbols in the life bars. Great idea. Excellent. Good to know. So let's talk about the loot goblin issue. It seems like it'll be solved by players simply just not knowing which monster is going to be the big loot pinata.
El tema del loot goblin.
But how do you feel about the loot conversion system overall? Because I thought this system was quite interesting.
¿Cómo se sientes acerca del sistema de conversión de loot?
How it was implemented.
Okay.
So for the unfamiliar, the loot conversion system is this new system that takes what a monster would usually drop and converts it into a new type of reward, like all currency, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So we've reviewed the loot conversions and added some new ones, dropped some old ones, like the ones that just gave you piles and piles of flasks, for example. As far as I know, that doesn't exist anymore. And we've gone through and made sure to use the feedback that people have had. So the way it works is rare monsters drop more items than regular monsters. By itself, that should be enough reward, but we want it to be interesting, and we want people to feel like they're really, you know, that there's an extra reason to kill rare monsters, because you could otherwise ignore them. And so you basically have these bonus drops that can occur. And bonus drops include conversions, but they also include a lot of other stuff. And there's a chance of getting the bonus drops that's proportional to the mods that are on the monster. For example, if a monster has 2 mods on it, then it has 2 chances to get a bonus. If it has 4 mods, it has 4 chances to get a bonus. And the individual mods have higher chances, where I believe like the more difficult ones, like for example, if there's one that's similar to one of the old Pantheon mods and that it does, you know, like it evokes some, you know, god who comes and smites you, for example, then it is significantly higher. There's a significantly higher chance that it's going to have a special drop here. And what you find is when a monster has, you know, the convergence of all of the really big mods in it, it's a hard fight, that results in there being a very high chance of one of these special drops.
los mods que eran fuertes antes, como los del Panteones, tienen un chance significativamente mayor de tener algún bonus, o sea, de ser un mod especial. Y, por supuesto, si ves a un monstruo raro y tiene 4 mods, tiene más chance de que tenga mods buenos. Porque tiene más mods, así de simple.
Potentially, under the right circumstances, get dozens and dozens of divines from a monster, and then everyone else feels like they're getting nothing. Wasn't great, so we're trying to make sure that there are still spikes, but it's a bit less spiky than before. There's a bit more spread across all of the different things, and a lot of the bad options are a bit better now.
A lot more variety too, it sounds like. Is this something you've considered doing to map bosses as well? Like, map bosses have definitely gotten better over time in terms of reward and more interesting, which I like. But it still seems like, in a lot of cases, they could get a little spicier.
Yeah, it's worth looking into. Yeah, we've been focusing this cycle on trying to get the monster mods into a good place and to scrub all the arch nemesis off everything.
Yes.
Dice que van a ver el tema de
You know those power washing videos? It's like
los,
Yeah, I'll get my gun
los
out.
bosses que van a revisar a ver
Dispose
si
of the arch
se le
nemesis
puede buscar
filth.
un poco el loot.
Oh dear.
Y estaban diciendo que me dio risa fue que dijeron que sí, van a verlo, pero estaban viendo todo el tema de los Arnemesis y de cómo podían lavarse todo eso. Pero se hizo así como que, oh,
there are way
todo.
more mods now, and that means Headhunter players that are getting a lot of mods cap out later. Previously, because there were relatively few arch nemesis mods, I mean, there were still dozens to be fair, but there were fewer. Once you've got them all active, you can't get more. Whereas here, there are far more mods, and so you can have far more upper end power. Having said that, these do less than the arch nemesis mods because that's what you asked us to do, and so they do implicitly. Like at the low end, Headhunter is less powerful. At the high end, Headhunter is more powerful. You pick which is best.
It's a kind of a slower ramp up to a higher potential.
Dice que el Headhunter es, en teoría, más fuerte ahora porque hay más mods que antes.
Excellent.
Antes había como un par de docenas, pero lo conseguías rápido.
Does that mean no more fractured flasks?
Y se dice, bueno, pero ahora como los que eran más simples, ahora el Headhunter es más débil al principio y después se pone más fuerte. Que eso fue lo que ustedes nos pidieron que hicieran. Por eso
that and the like piles of whetstones ones are 2 examples. Yeah, it'll fracture regular flask drops.
Okay. Simple Cookie asks, will the Atlas passive that increase the amount of mods on rare monsters be added back with the new rare monster changes?
I don't think it has been. Do you know that?
La quiso que agrega mods.
I mean, we certainly discussed it, but we want to kind of get a vanilla experience here of how many rare monster mods is appropriate, and an issue with feedback is if there are ways to juice it up and then people say there are too many mods, we don't know if they necessarily had that active. So we'll consider it for the future, but you know, this has been a year of rare monster mods, so let's just try this new system and see if people appreciate the changes, and then we can look at further changes to it.
Dijo que como que ha pasado casi un año de cambios a los monstruos raros, así que ¿qué tal si vemos que las personas aprecian este cambio? Y después vemos qué pasa después.
Divine and Exalted Orbs around. Now that we've had a league with the various changes surrounding these high-end currencies, I'd like to know, what were the goals of effectively swapping Divines and Exalts, and how effective have the changes been?
¿Cuáles fueron las metas de cambiar las Exaltes por las Divines?
Y si fueron efectivas. That someone would actually consider taking an item and using an Exalted Orb to get another mod that is random.
Primero que todo, usar un Exalted en un ítem. Sí, eso está pasando.
Secondly,
True and
we
real.
want it to be harder to divine items, not just because we're mean, but because it makes well-rolled uniques more valuable. Previously, because divines were really accessible, well, relatively accessible.
Los ítems únicos son más valiosos y tienen buenos rolls.
It didn't really feel that special because someone can slam a few divines into it to get something like that. Now there is quite a wide variance of stuff. Like look at something like Brass Dome, for example, where the the worst versions of it are worth quite a lot less than the really good ones, and that's more fun because then you find something that's just a much better version of something that someone else has that's worth less, and you feel good about that. These goals were achieved, right? Like it certainly is harder to divine items. It is easier to exalt them.
Es más difícil divinear, tal, lo que tú quieras.
Life goes on. We'll continue to make broad changes whenever we feel like
¿Qué onda
it. But it's sometimes good to
¿Qué onda con
cause
eso?
a bit of a shift in how people value items, so you don't get entrenched values. You don't get people believing, oh, this item is 6x forever. You know, it changes because the game changes.
So for the standard players that are still coping with their stash full of exalts because they didn't convert them over in time,
this is like seriously, like, oh, I had entirely all my money in Bitcoin and now it's worthless, right? Like diversify, right? Again, economics.
Que hay
Chris is
personas
teaching
que dicen como
multiple
que, oh, tenía
economics
todo mi dinero en
lessons today.
bitcoins y ahora ya no vale
Set you
nada.
up for life, have a
Diversifiquen.
diversified portfolio of currency items.
Okay.
Un portafolio de distintos
It's
tipos de
really nice.
currency.
Keep some rares, keep some crafting stuff. Anyway,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you got to invest in some high-end, one-of-a-kind items, right?
some old skin maps, maybe alternate.
Oh yeah.
I found out I have this red beak on my account from the early race seasons. Like I'm talking, I logged in to do races back in 2013 to literally test they were working and got an alternate art red beak, and now it's worth a mirror in standard.
Wait, is it? I'm pretty sure I have one of those.
Well, I mean that was just with a quick search, but yeah. So invest in a variety of different items in your standard portfolio if you don't want to get wrecked by economic changes.
If only I played in standard, I'd be rich. It's so good. It's interesting to see some new Vars skills. It's certainly been a while. I tried to like look up exactly when, and I think 3.3 Incursion was the last time, which was get ready, 17 leagues ago.
Así
So
técnica fue que
powerful, longer
tuvimos
cooldown or like ultimate
skill
skills make
vals.
gameplay quite a bit more engaging, I think. And a lot of people love Val skills for that reason.
Yes.
It's certainly an
Val skills son
underutilized
cool.
skill category, though, not something you add new skills to all the time. So how do you decide then whether to make a skill, a Val skill, or just a regular skill that does a similar thing?
Well, if we're trying to come up with an ultimate skill, Val skills are ones that we have a control over you only using periodically, whereas regular skills, we generally don't put big cooldowns on them unless there's a bypassable thing. So if it's something where there's a good cooldown bypass mechanism, then it will probably be a regular skill. Now, the thing we're doing with Val skills here is we want to buff melee. There are a number of, like, you may be thinking, wow, that's a lot of changes to melee, or you may be thinking, where are all the melee changes, depending on whether you happen to notice stuff. But the changes to endgame unique weapons affect melee. The Val skill stuff affects melee in a way I'll discuss in a second. There's a bunch of other bits and pieces, like melee splash is being added to as a node on the passive tree.
Sí.
And we have some, I'm not
Sino
supposed
que
to
el
talk
tema de
about
los
the
Val
details
skills es
because
como
it's secret,
un
but
cambio
you'll find
indirecto
there's some totem
los
mastery
melee.
that affects melee in an interesting way. So there's a few bits and pieces that together actually do make quite a cohesive set of melee buffs. But the theory with the Val ones
que afectan a los melee.
We targeted a set of weaker melee skills where previously, if the player is using that skill, they just do the damage they were doing. And rather than just saying, oh, we're going to give the skill a little bit more damage, which has various issues, we've created a Val version, which at face value means that every X attacks, you get to do a more powerful one, which is an indirect buff. But we've tried to design many of these Val skills so that they also directly buff the main version. Like Val Cleave is an example where if you're using Val Cleave occasionally, your cleaves themselves are more powerful. And so it's doing a more powerful attack sometimes and increasing the power of your other attacks the rest of the time. And because of the change where using the Val gem gives you the regular version of the skill, then there's no excuse not to be using Val Cleave if you were playing a Cleave character. And so overall, there are a lot of Val skills there that cause melee characters to be quite a lot more powerful. It also meant that we could, for example, target skills that we felt needed it. Now, when you see the patch notes in a little bit, you'll notice there's a small nerf to Lightning Strike, right? And you may be thinking, well, if we're trying to buff melee, what are you doing nerfing Lightning Strike? And the answer is it's far, 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 far better than the other melee skills. And so we're buffing the category, but that doesn't mean that every skill needs to come out entirely.
No, por supuesto, maten ese skill, Lightning Strike,
damage on it. And so you'll find that melee overall is more powerful, but within the melee category, there's quite a lot more options available than there were before.
All right.
Far more powerful.
So yeah, you like
mucho más fuerte
es
el Lightning Strike en comparación a otras skills de melee.
We'll just give it a mini headhunter. Well, that'll help. should do. Of our skills, then a concept that's likely to carry forth into Path of Exile 2 with its altered skill fit, a system even.
No comment.
Okay.
Oh,
nice.
Lo...
Frozen Legion is a pretty big news as well. So to clarify, people who missed a particular detail about it, it's actually a spell that summons statues that then attack with your weapon, right?
Yep, that's correct.
A spell attack. So you've done it now. There's nothing to stop you from casting a spell that shoots your bow's arrow or attack that casts a spell that then does another attack. So is this something you're going to explore more potentially?
I'd say consider this as a hint at the way we're designing some Path of Exile 2 skills.
A little bit more going on. I like it. Very cool. We have a couple extra chat questions here. Oh, everyone was asking about divine shards. Yeah, I see your chat. I see you spamming divine shards. Okay, everyone wants to know, are divine shards going to be a thing? Chris?
They're called chaos orbs. Shards have problems. Shard. Okay, so we
Divine
designed
Shards
Path of
dice que
Exile
se
to
llaman
get away
Chaos
from the
Orbs.
concept of there being a homogeneous gold currency in games, right? And I understand every league we do, we introduce gold in it, but that's, you know, within the confines of that particular scope. But overall, in main Path of Exile, we want to make sure that the currency items have fluctuating values relative to each other. It's very important as part of the way that trade works.
Okay.
And so taking something like Divine Orbs that are the de facto currency for high-end trades and adding a granular, proportional, like Divine Sense thing is not something that we would do unless there was a good reason for it. And so we'd have no plans to add Divine Shards. We think it would potentially be negative. It's okay to use cheaper currency as the Divine Shards. Like, you can take Chaos Orbs and turn them into Divines through trade or other mechanisms. The value fluctuates, but that's what we want it to be doing.
All right.
Dice que no le agrada la idea de poner más Divine Shards y agregar más granularidad a la currency, que si tienes algo de valor, eso puede fluctuar y puede valer menos o más después.
Yeah, so it's like Val Double Strike, for example.
The attack onto plane asks, does Val Flicker attack one target multiple times? So does it have like boss applications then, or is it more about pack clear?
Can hit the same target more than once, so on a boss, every single target.
Yeah, against a single target, it will do every single hit against that target.
Very anime. Cool. Okay.
It is very anime, yes.
Dice el Val Flicker Strike funciona contra los bosses. Porque puedes dar un montón de hits y después va a dar un montón de hits, ¿no? Pero cuando termine va a dar un solo hit que va a ser el daño sumado de todos los hits, así como un anime, básicamente. ¿Sabes? El típico...
give you some useful information to
1000 golpes y después se ve como el tipo que...
So crafting systems have been a bit of a trend lately, I noticed, with leagues. Like Sentinel Recombinators, for example, and like a Calandra Mirroring.
Eso lo reconocí.
Some of these crafting systems end up being particularly liked by the players too. I think people really like the Recombinators. Are these sorts of new crafting systems designed with becoming core features in mind, or are they more experiments to explore future design possibilities? And is crafting systems something that you're keen to keep experimenting with?
We want to introduce something new in every league, a new way of getting items, or a new thing you can do with items. We found that if we leave it in the game just as a de facto thing, then you accumulate dozens and dozens and dozens of systems that create both power creep and complexity creep for the way the crafting works. And that's good. Path of Exile is meant to have that stuff, and power creep is natural, and there's no big problem there.
Okay.
But we have found that introducing stuff like recombinators and then turning it off until we've had a good think about how it fits in is probably safer. Like, a lot of expectations with Harvest would have been reduced if we hadn't reintegrated it into the game before we were ready to and before we fully understood the consequences of that.
True.
And so with the
¿Y si le gustaron los recombinadores?
Calandra or the recombinators,
y si hubiesen manejado mejor
a
Harvest antes de traerlo de vuelta en full power,
to continue to introduce systems like this,
manejado
some
mejor
of
las
which
expectativas.
will stick around, some of which won't. An example is Sanctified Relics in the Sanctum offer a lot of character power. And that's a Sanctum-specific thing. We don't expect that Sanctified Relics will necessarily exist after Sanctum is finished. Maybe we make it core, maybe we don't, maybe we keep them, maybe we don't. But they're a thing for that league that let you experiment with builds that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. There are a lot of things in there which let you push your build further than you normally would. And that's something that's cool about the Sanctum League. It may be that it becomes a permanent part of Path of Exile later, and we are looking for ways to bring stuff back. Like, I don't know if this is actually a thing, but at least in our planning, one of the things that the monster mods could cause, you know how they have those special drops that occur that we were speaking about a few minutes ago, one of the things that they could drop was the mist that mirrors from Calandra, for example, the one that gives you the 2 currency items. I don't know what form that will be in. If it's in 320, we're still sorting out the details of some of the exotic ones like that. But that's an example of us taking a system that was used as a reward mechanic for a league and then making it a rare reward from another system in the game.
Cool. Speaking of things that
Básicamente está hablando de
cómo
cómo de lo que planean hacer con los sistemas que introduzcan de crafteo, y dice que algunos está bien que estén en una liga y que dejen de existir, y hay otros que es como que podemos reintroducirlo de otra forma, porque tal vez era muy común en la liga y después lo podemos agregar en el juego.
And then there's the actual automated mechanic. Now, we have a plan for the automated mechanic, and we mentioned there is a plan for a while, and that plan is not due yet, but it is coming at some point until it changes. Having said that, the offer/deferral system in Sanctum does feel a lot like it. This is where we say, here is a thing, or you can keep going in order to double it, essentially, but with quite a lot more doubling going on. And so players who liked the risk of ultimatum will certainly like that mechanic.
Okay, okay.
Interesting. Yeah, I can see the parallel there.
Básicamente, está hablando de ultimátum. Dice que todavía el plan está en progreso hasta que lo cambien. Pero la gente que le gusta ultimátum le va a gustar bastante esta liga porque tiene esa similitud de riesgo y recompensa.
Hopefully, those who couldn't get into the alpha and who are interested in that mode can have a chance to check it out when it launches alongside 320.
All right.
Los personas que no entraron en el alfa y quieren chequearlo lo pueden hacer en la 320 cuando salga.
For the mode, for example.
We will do some Ruthless-specific skill balance. Currently, the focus was on getting fundamentals in place, like getting the mode to function. And then if we find time later, we'll be able to use it to make whatever changes are needed on specific skills. And to some extent, with, as you know, with the way Path of Exile works, if there's a skill that's dominant and somewhat trivializing stuff, then we won't have any qualms about ruthlessly nerfing that in that mode. Now, there's a fundamental philosophy difference, right? A player who's playing the main game will get upset if we nerf their skills. And this is because there's a way they like to play Path of Exile. If we just decide we hate minion characters one day, then all these people who come to Path of Exile to enjoy playing minion characters as a reliable way they can engage with the game would be upset that now they can't do the thing they like. In Ruthless, all bets are off. We will make whatever changes we feel like, and it will stay hard, and you will have to adapt. And, you know, the Ruthless players are big boys. They can deal with this.
Estoy diciendo que en Ruthless ellos empiezan a hacer cambios fuertes como que si ves que está dominando, lo vamos a nerfear fuertemente. Y dice que la gente de Ruthless son buenos chicos, así que simplemente van a lidiar con esto y van a adaptarse. Pero si en el Path of Exile normal tú juegas minions y te los nerfeamos, hay personas que van a empezar a llorar al respecto. Que no dijo llorar, pero básicamente.
Kyle MC asks, how does quantity and rarity affect the Sanctum? And I'll append to that.
¿Cómo afecta la quantity y la rarity del Sanctum? Importantísima pregunta.
Sanctum, right? It's a separate zone.
Yeah, your map mods do not affect the Sanctum. Quantity and rarity on your character will affect your drops you get from the monsters, I believe, right? There are monsters in the Sanctum that you can kill, and they drop items. So it's not like, you know, the goal is that when you're mapping, it doesn't reduce the amount of item drops you get by going and playing in the Sanctum. You do get drops, and those monsters are technically unique monsters, so technically they're reduced. And quantity and rarity do affect that. So going into the Sanctum, killing some monsters is roughly similar to killing monsters on the map that you came from, plus all the Sanctum rewards on top.
Nice. Damaris asks, how endgame is the new mechanic? So that'd be Sanctum. Does that encounter that on like the first speech as you start the campaign, or does it kick in later?
Yep, kicks in right at the beginning. So basically you start doing your first Sanctum at level like 2 or whatever, you know, as you get into the coast, and you probably won't get very far in those Sanctum runs, but it's a good opportunity to start learning. Start accumulating some relics and so on, and you'll need them because later on it gets really hard. There are some things in the Sanctum, like the special endgame uniques that can only be dropped if you are very high in maps, because they're very, very powerful pinnacle things. But yeah, it does play throughout the entire campaign.
Great.
Dice que hay algunas cosas que nada más salen en zonas y en level alto del santuario, porque son cosas endgame, pero puedes sacar cosas al principio.
I'm just going to smile. We thought of that one.
Oh, okay. Mystery.
Maybe it's been buffed as well.
Oh, okay. Something to be revealed potentially then, I'm getting.
¿Qué dijo? No lo leí, estaba traduciendo.
Will our Star Forges or Lionized Glares sitting in Standard be buffable to their Headhunter tier strengths with a Divine Orb?
Yep. I know, it's stupid, isn't it? But we had to do that because it's fair and because of divination cards that you could have been hoarding and all the other things. So yeah, you get some free ridiculous items in Standard if you had diversified into them.
Standard chat.
Si tienes en estándar los ítems, puedes tirarles una divine para actualizarlos.
Excellent.
Someone says stonks. That's great.
Okay. FDXCO asks, with endgame unique weapons becoming more rare, what about their respective divination cards, like Starforges, for example?
Yes, we are adjusting the divination cards. This means in Standard, the old divination cards are now worth more.
All right.
Y eso significa que en estándar hay divination cards que ahora valen más. Okay.
Man with Hat, any plans to decouple melee from buffs granted by totems, Ancestral Protector or War Chief?
This is actually a hot topic internally. I don't know the answer. Okay. Like, I think it's the case where our designers acknowledge this is a problem and are looking for solutions, but maybe we've doubled down on it a little bit in this one because of that totem mastery I mentioned before. We can You'll see
That's
what I
true.
mean.
Wait and see.
Ok,
Doug is the last. Will
estoy
Ruthless
diciendo
launch
de
on
que
console at League launch day?
internamente ellos saben
I
que...
believe so.
Ok,
Yeah.
ellos saben internamente de que lo del tema de los totems de Ancestral,
Lots
Protector
of
y eso
maiden
es un
questions, which we
problema
already asked.
para Melee, pero que tal
Theorycrafter
vez...
and many other people ask, is Reforge keep prefix/suffix coming back in some shape or form? Speaking of things coming back.
Ya va, esto es importante.
I'm not aware of it coming back. No, sorry.
Ok, viene... el tema de los totems dice que hay una nueva maestría de totems que puede ser muy OP para eso. Pero que es un problema y que quieren cambiarlo. Quieren cambiarlo para que los melee no sean como que obligados a tener estos totems. No va a haber Reforge, Prefix, Keep, Suffix, bullshit, ¿sabes? Eso no lo van a traer. Dijeron que, o sea, dijeron que no van a hacerlo hoy. Dijeron que no era lo que van a hacer.
We feel people completely misunderstood what is there, and like we didn't want to go on a big rant and try to correct people, but we posted some numbers at some point during the league and then left it. But it boils down to this: if you're a regular player playing regular content, as we can see based on like looking at what regular players are doing, and by regular I mean people in red maps, then there is no loss of anything. It's better than it was before. Like Sentinel is higher than it was previously, and people didn't believe us. They said doubt. They weren't happy with that, so we just stopped trying to push the point. If you were one of those groups that were juicing stuff to insane degrees with 6-person parties and all the crazy stuff going on and using exactly the right league mechanics with exactly the right stuff, then yeah, absolutely there was a nerf there. And for some reason, the community like feeling about this was that we nerfed the average person. Like, it's a little bit of a Robin Hood thing where we tried to take from the rich and give to the poor, and the communication around the whole thing was poorly done. We didn't explain it, like patch note it correctly. We didn't communicate about it. We didn't really understand the nature of the changes fully ourselves. But where we got it to with the buffs we did was better than where it was before, unless you were doing one of the crazy juice situations. And so it was frustrating for us because we felt that the miscommunication had kind of... The miscommunication is our fault, but we felt the whole situation kind of ran away and caused people to really hate the loot situation more than they should have done. Anyway,
dice que el tema del loot, que me parece que es cierto.
This has taught us a lot of lessons about communication, but there's no need to further improve drops related to that. The amount of currency and stuff that you're getting, and uniques, in fact, especially uniques that you're getting for regular gameplay involving a variety of different leagues, does exceed what it was in 3.18. It's just that if you're playing the crazy Imperium style stuff as we describe it, then you're certainly getting less, and that was an intentional part of the change.
Has there been some sort of change to the way that you're like approaching the reveals?
Dice que el tema de los drops en general es mejor que antes en todo sentido, excepto de si estás en el super top metiendo
Historically,
todo el
we've
juice
tried very hard
imposible.
not to talk about drop rate changes. If we feel that something drops too often, we'll just change it. And for, decades, well, not decades, but more than a decade, we have followed that policy. Having said that, we should have talked about the changes to the quantity and rarity bonuses from different league content, because it does affect decisions people are making. There was stuff before that was really juicy and everyone wanted to play that. And we tried to make it more fair so that the leagues are roughly equal. And that's something that should have been communicated more clearly. And we certainly learned the lesson there. And the lack of communication there was not malicious. It was entirely just like, ignorance on our part. There was miscommunications internally. I missed the memo almost literally. And that meant that it wasn't as much part of the marketing as it should have been. And we certainly have tried very hard this time not to make the same mistake again.
All right. Okay. Good to hear. Thank you very much for the insights, Chris, and thank you for spending this time together with us, the Q&A.
Todo lo que tenga que ver con drops y loots
patch notes
es algo que van a tener súper cuidado de ahora en adelante y sobre todo comunicarlo correctamente. Ok, básicamente toda esta última parte quería verlo porque es polémica, es drama, ¿no? De hecho mencionó los que juegan al estilo de Empyrean. Dice que ellos sí recibieron un nerf, pero es algo... Dijeron que ellos tenían como una filosofía medio Robin Hood, como que le quitamos al rico y lo pusimos al pobre. Porque si tú estás jugando para 2 Exile de una forma más regular o normal, vas a recibir más cosas que antes. Si estás en ese super top end, sí vas a recibir menos. Pero la realidad es que si estás en ese top end, estás recibiendo más que la mayoría. So... Pero bueno. A ver, habilito ahora sí las alertas. Van a ser un montón. Ahí se acabó el stream. Ok, nice. Nice, nice, nice.
My excitement is immeasurable.
¡Ey, cabra loca! Gracias por el sub. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Fist bump. No lo había visto. En serio no lo había visto.
Good to see you.
Ok. Ahí hay otro sub más, me parece.
Hello.
Este es por los follows.
Good to see you. This brings exaltation.
¡Krull!
Estamos chulitos.
Fist bump. Gracias por ese sub, Krull. Ya no eres alguien sospechoso.
How you going?
Still sane.
Hello.
Good to see you. Still sane.
Greetings.
My excitement is
El
immeasurable.
pato. Gracias por ese sub también, papucho. Fist bump. There you go. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Vamos a
Good to
ir
see you.
acomodando esto como estaba. Decía acá. Aquí.
Exile.
Y ponemos esto de acá. Eso mismo. Esto le damos a...
Good to see you.
Vamos a darle esto. A ver si esto lo acomoda. Sí, ahí está. Ahí lo acomodo.
Exile.
Maravilloso. Maravilloso. Ahí está actualizado.
Greetings.
Uy, hay un
Exile.
montón de
My
follows.
excitement is
¡Espadas!
immeasurable.
Gracias por ese premisazo. Fist bump, papucho. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, señor de espadas.
Unexpected.
Y muchas
But
gracias,
not unwelcome.
Core. Core 304. Gracias por ese Prime también. Fist bump. Listo. Bueno, a ver. So, ahí tenemos. Eso fue lo que dijeron en el... en esta cosa del Q&A. Me salté una cosa que no recuerdo cuál era, pero la respuesta de él fue como que voy a sonreír y ya. Así que sea lo que sea que hayan preguntado, no dio respuesta como tal. Así que bueno, that's it. Creo que dentro de todo el Q&A estuvo bien. Ahora vamos a revisar todo el tema de Mongo Pongo. Fist bump, papucho. Vamos a revisar todo el tema de Forbidden Sanctum acá. Vamos viendo cada una de las cosas que nos muestren y, por supuesto, voy a explicar todo lo que yo entendí de la liga para las personas que están llegando un poquito tarde o las personas que no entendieron algo o lo que sea, pues yo sé que está en inglés y tal, entonces lo vamos viendo acá. Aparte de eso, vamos también a ver lo del bingo y vamos también a ver lo de las patch notes. Así que ahí va. Vamos a ver todo esto.